Hi, everyone. Welcome to our February webinar. We're so excited to have Brad here today, and we're going to talk more about it in a second. But we do these every month, and we talk about talent topics featuring CS, PS revenue leaders. So if you haven't been to one before, welcome. And if you're interested to know what we've done in the past, check them out on our website. We have a ton of them. So next slide, please, Brad. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Swathi Garg. I'm the CEO of Milo Associates. Really feel like how the best way I would describe myself is an entrepreneur. I love creating things. I love making impact. I'm lucky enough to be, recognized in some really great spaces, and would love to talk to you about anything entrepreneurial if you want. So, next slide, please. And then a little bit about Milo Associates. I wanted to take a second. We've had a lot of change in the last year, and so really want to highlight that for a minute for those who don't know much about Milo Associates. So we are a truly started off in a true fashion customer success recruiting firm. Over the last year, we've really broadened. I had added professional services, but now we do all revenue protection expansion roles. So CS, PS support, implementation, sales leadership. So it's been really exciting. And we've expanded the industries. So originally we started only doing SaaS and tech, but now we do more manufacturing and consulting as well. So if you have any questions about that, let us know. Next slide, please, Brett. And we've added a bunch of services. So originally we were just search, where we did focused on recruiting, but now we've really spliced up the recruiting process so we can help companies in a lot of different ways. And we actually added some ad hoc, just like 1 hour quick coaching calls. There's a lot of great coaches out there, but we are not coaches, but we get a lot of questions about the job search. So we've added these 1 hour hot calls where people can just ask a bunch of like burning questions if they want a recruiter's perspective. Then also we have like consulting and all of the different areas of the job search of the recruiting process. Sorry. And then next slide, please, Brad. And then our three big services, this is really what we do mostly day in and day out. We do full service recruitment. We do our on-demand resumes. So companies who have like thousands of resumes but don't have the bandwidth to go through them, we'll help you with that. And then our big new initiative is the Employee Mobility Program, which is why it's right in the middle, to talk about and help companies internally mobilize their employees so they are keeping their top performers or retaining them, and they're moving them to open roles they have before they go external. So we can really help with both now, which is really exciting for us. Next slide, please. And Brad. So I am so excited to introduce Brad today. Brad and I actually met last year at Gainsight Pulse in 2024. So if you haven't been there, it's definitely a really fun experience. And I loved what he's doing with Success Panda, which I'm sure he's going to talk about a little bit today. But it's a great professional development platform, and they continue to build and grow it. I mean, we've become partners with Brad and Success Panda over the last year, and it's been a really great experience. And we've met countless times at other events in the last year, so we just keep bumping into each other, and have been having great conversations. So, Brad, thank you so much for being here today and for being a part of our webinar series. I'm going to hand it off to you, and I look forward to learning from you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Swathi. Yeah, so echo just what Swathi said. I met Swathi last year, and she's great. She's one of the most bubbly, friendliest people that I think exists in our space. So I'm glad to be on the webinar today and happy to share some of my thoughts. So, today's topic is something that has basically helped drive a lot of my professional success since I started working professionally. And so the topic of using jobs theory and understanding customer motivations to drive innovation, we're going to talk about outcome-driven innovation, ODI. But really, this is a lot of people here work in tech, and this is something that might be a surprise to some people, but Customers really don't care about our products. They only care about their jobs to be done. So I have here basically my presentation. There's be a lot of stories. I'll share a lot of stories from my background, share some examples of what to do, what not to do, some companies that do jobs theory well and outcome driven innovation well. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end, which Swathi will lead. But I have the chat open. If you do have a burning question, I can see it over here on my other monitor. I'll try best to answer it. And if not, we'll cover it at the very end. All right. So everyone likes to start out with a little history lesson. So if you're brand new to this idea of what is jobs theory or jobs to be done, so there's different names for it. It's either jobs theory or jobs to be done. And essentially, this is a theory that was pioneered by this guy right here. So we have the fun graphic of him pointing at the actual product that is really common for when you first get introduced to jobs theory. So this is Clay Christensen. He has since passed, but he was a Harvard Business School professor, a consultant, and a thought leader, one of the pioneers of the jobs to be done theory. And so just to give a little background on it, he was working as a consultant and he had a couple partners and they were hired by McDonald's, which is why we have the McDonald's milkshake. And essentially, McDonald's was doing this audit and inventory of their entire stores. And they wanted to know, hey, what are the most productive machines in our store? And what are the least productive machines in terms of helping us make money? And over again, a lot of the data came back that the milkshake machine was as least productive. So he was hired by McDonald's to help them sell more milkshakes or understand how their customers were using milkshakes. And so he set out to go to different locations. So he went to different locations to try to understand what customers were hiring. And that's kind of we hire products to do jobs. He was trying to understand the motivations and why people were choosing to have a milkshake. So what they found is they would go out to certain locations where the data showed that there were certain big cities where there were much higher milkshakes. So when they looked at the data, I think there were three major cities: Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and I think Chicago, where they were selling a lot more milkshakes in the morning. So they go to these areas and they do interviews. So there's a guy sitting out there with a clipboard. The guy pulls through the line and he stops the person. He says, "Hey, I want to know why did you just buy this milkshake right now at 6:30 a.m.?" And they ended up finding out that the people would say, "Well, I need something that's going to fill my time for my commute because I get bored and I want something that will be sweet and something that will like make me full until lunchtime, until about 10 o'clock." And they're like, "Oh, that is interesting." And then another spike in the data was in the evening when after like soccer practice, 7 o'clock, when you see all these families coming in and they ask the parents with the kids, "Hey, why are you getting them a milkshake?" And they're like, "So I can feel like a good parent, so I can feel like a good mom or dad." So what they ended up finding from all this was that there were two main jobs that people were hiring a milkshake for that was driving a lot of their sales. One was to fill a commute time, and one was to make sure you feel like a good parent. And so what Clay and his team were able to do is they ended up changing the viscosity or the thickness of the milkshake to make sure that in the morning during the commute it was thicker so that it would last longer, and then in the evening it was thinner so that the kids could hurry up and drink it and they weren't sitting at McDonald's all day. And because of this they were able to sell more milkshakes, and they were able to increase the milkshake revenue by changing the viscosity. And then ultimately, it took about 10 years, but the McDonald's started rolling out their yogurt like lineup that they have currently that they sell for a breakfast food, where they still have milkshakes, but you now can get yogurt. So they kind of add another product mix. And one of the interesting things that we'll focus on as we continue on this webinar is, that people are buying your product to either make progress or to do a specific job, like we talked about. And during the interviews, they talked about, he's like, well, do you sometimes hire anything else other than a milkshake to fill your commute in the morning? And people said, yeah, sometimes I hire a donut. Sometimes, I hire a pastry. And one time I even hired a Snicker bar, but I felt bad about myself when I did that. And so I decided not to hire that product again. So did McDonald's know that their TAM, or what their market was? They were competing against, Snickers bars and some of these pastries, and that was kind of news to them. And so jobs theory is a way of viewing, um, almost viewing the world and viewing the products that exist in terms of why are customers hiring our products. So this is a really common example that you see a lot of jobs theory. So a lot of times, say you go to a new company, you have a technical founder, they are in love with their technology, their platform. They say, hey, we have all these solutions, we can do this and that. But fundamentally, there's just a different way of looking at the world, and so of what products can do. So some people have a solution lens, but jobs theory tries to shift our perspective to having a jobs lens or a problem lens, right? And so the old saying is, people don't buy a 3/4 inch drill bit, they buy a 3/4 inch hole. So no one's buying a bit just to have a bit. They have the bit so that they can have a hole, right? And so when you start thinking in a jobs lens, you see a lot of opportunity unfold. So let's talk a little bit about outcome-driven innovation. All right, so discovering what your TAM is hard. So you're all probably working at companies right now where you have a specific TAM, or you have people who say things like, what is the use case? Who's our market? All of these things. And I think when you start looking through a jobs lens at both your product and your market, it can actually be quite difficult to understand what your TAM is or what your market is. So we don't want to ask, what does my product do, instead of ask, what is the customer trying to get done? So for example, let's say that you work at a kettle company and you spend a lot of money on consultants, and they go out and they say, oh, I see you're trying to boil water, and we're going to engineer the best boiling water machine that we can find. And that's great. They do that job well, but because they didn't ask bigger, more inclusive questions, like, what are you trying to do, right? What are you trying to do with our product? They miss out on, well, what I'm really doing is I'm going to prepare a hot beverage for consumption. So there's actually there's a bigger job that needs to be done, which a lot of companies miss out on because they're not asking what are you trying to do? They just simply use their observational skills to just say, hey, this is what it looks like they're doing, right? And so we're going to infer that we know what they're trying to do rather than ask them, right? So let's bring up an example. So we got a Canon and Sony, cameras over here. This is an industry, right, who was not looking through the lens of jobs theory, right, or of jobs to be done. They weren't focused on their customers, they were focused on their competition. So when this professional camera market is competing, they're adding this feature, they're adding that one, they're seeing what the other camera does because they're trying to one up on their competition, who they believe is their competition, right? Meanwhile, the iPhone and smartphones in general, through portrait mode and through other innovations, start just getting better, 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 and better. And as a result, when you look at the number of units that have been sold for these professional cameras over 10 years, when the iPhone was coming out and developing, they lost 90% of their unit loss sales. So they were selling 90% less cameras. Because when you think about it, before iPhones and cameras started getting really good, that um, probably a family or maybe your uncle or aunt, or there's a lot more people that had, we'll just say, these more professional single-use cameras that are just, cameras. They're great. They do the job. But the thing is if they were talking to their customers, they were competing against the job of good enough, right? And we'll talk more about that. I just want to have a picture that's good enough. I don't need to have a magazine cover. So this is if they would have focused and spoke to their customers about, hey, what job are you trying to do? Oh, I just need a simple way to capture the moments of my child's life. They could have come up with some sort of handheld, size a camera like an iPhone. It doesn't have to have all the functions of an iPhone, right? But it could have taken pictures, but they completely missed that boat and missed that opportunity to compete in that market. So so that was kind of like what not to do. A company that actually has outcome-driven innovation success story from 1 to 4 is a company we might be familiar with in the SaaS space called Intercom. So when Intercom was um, first started as a startup, they had two founders. They had two prior startups before, and they got to about 3 million ARR, and then they were stuck. Okay. And then they hired some consultants to go out and basically do some interviews for their customers. And what they found is when they're interviewing their current customer base, they found that Intercom, which was intended originally to be a software where you could stand up a SaaS company, what they found was that their users were using certain parts of Intercom and ignoring other parts because they, for example, wanted in-app messaging, so they're competing, or ticket support, so they were competing against Zendesk, or they were in some CRM stuff, they were competing against HubSpot. And so what they found is that they had all of these different jobs that Intercom did, which were important to the user, and by talking to their customers about how they define success and what were the jobs they were trying to do and what were they trying to accomplish, they were able to split out basically having one offer to 4 separate offers. And when they split that out into a functional job, they were able to go from 3 million to 75 million in 18 months. So they were able to achieve hyper growth. And the reason I decided to use this specific example is because we'll get to this more later, but I suspect, without actually doing the work, that this happens all the time in software companies. And I'm sure if viewer or watching this, you're working at a software company or SaaS company, you see that certain segments of your product are getting used. And then others are getting completely ignored. There's ways to perhaps rearrange the product in order to, really message and target that job, rather than having a potential higher pricing point that customers aren't using the rest of the application. So let's talk about some personal stuff right now. So those were what not to do, what to do, outcome-driven innovation. It's focusing on the outcomes, right? So the first example that I want to use here of jobs to be done is Cincinnati farmhouse tables. Okay, so I graduated from college. I'm working. I have a couple jobs after college, and my wife comes to me and she says, "Hey, Brad, I just watched this YouTube video. Can you make me a table like this? And I say, sure. How hard can it be? Um, and turned out it's a lot harder than you think, especially when you do something for the first time. It's always harder than what you think. And so I started on a journey where I built a table. My wife liked it. We had um, friends come over. They said, "Hey, where'd you get this table?" "Oh, I built it." "Okay, cool. Can you build me one?" And I was like, "Sure." And they're like, "Well, how much do you charge?" I'm like, "I have no idea." So I have a picture somewhere of my very first table I built for a client. It wasn't my best work, but you got to start somewhere. So, long story short, I go on this journey where I have this custom furniture business. So, the first job that I identified was very simple. People just wanted a table, right? But as I started to do more of the business and talk to my customers about what are they trying to achieve, I uncovered job number two, which was they want to have pictures that they can share on social media and to show off their goods. So you're saying, okay, that's great, Brad. Well, what did you do? And I would say, hey, I can stage your as a little extra service, a little extra charge. After I build your table, I have decor, I have a room, and I can just stage it in case you're like moving into a new house and there's boxes. So you can have a nice picture. Um, that you can post on social media, or if you're wanting to sell it one day, you have this standard picture of what it was like when you were bought. And I started selling like a little service that was kind of an add-on. Um, it was only like $50, but people started buying it because rather than they're like, well, I don't have my own decor, I got to dig out of the garage, but I really want to have a nice picture. So they did that. So which was interesting. And then that led to another job, which was selling chairs and accessories and have interior design consulting. Like, it's almost funny because I never thought in my wildest dreams when I started building tables that I was going to, in 3 years' time, have people start asking me how they should arrange their house and what looks good in their space. I did gain a little bit of a knack for that, but people were willing to pay for that service where you can see in picture three. I didn't start building any chairs because they're incredibly expensive to make, but I found a way to have them built for me, and I just finished them, and then to match with the set. And once we started doing that, the amount of money that we made was a lot greater, and I was making more money doing this than in my day job. And what it proved to me is that there's always the jobs to be done from your customers. Is if you do the smaller jobs, you get invited to do bigger jobs. So transition to over to a SaaS company, I was asked to so I'm in customer success right now. How I was asked to get in there was I was invited to meet with a CEO, and instead of like starting at the bottom where you become a CSM, level one, I was asked to join a startup and become a director because of my experience being an entrepreneur and being able to, identify jobs. So effectively, jobs theory and understanding jobs theory helped me to land a director role in CS at a startup first. So, because I'm talking about jobs theory in my interview. And then as I got hired, this is just an artifact I took from the website, but this is one of the success stories that I had at my first director job in CS. You can see that there's different tiered packages. So when I first arrived, there was one offer, similar to Intercom, right? There's one offer, one price point. And what I essentially did is through talking with my customers and understanding, hey, what are you trying to achieve? I remember I was on the phone with this guy at this contractor called BMWC. They're a fairly big contractor. He's a sales guy, and he said, uh, you know, I really want to get these reports so that I can help sell and land bids so that we can win contracts. And at the company, the original kind of use case, what we were known for was not helping salespeople, uh, use our reports that we sold. and use our platform that we provided, we didn't we didn't help salespeople. We didn't do that, as they would say, right? What we did was we helped planners and superintendents of large construction projects know when to bring on certain skilled trade laborers and help provide intelligence for them on how to run their project. Um, so essentially, I had discovered a new job, right? And with this new job, I saw the opportunity to really affect change in the organization. So what I did is I actually came up with these at the time. There was three, and so you can see they've added a fourth one here. But this is the same language that still to this day that they're using, executive, expert, and enterprise, where instead of having one huge offer similar to intercom, I kind of broke it up and tiered out based off of what customers were looking to achieve according to their jobs to be done. And I still remember our first upsell. Um, I was in the only little conference room we had. The customer at the time, I remember who it was, and they were at a $5,000 ARR, and I sold them up to, I think it was 15.5. And I remember walking out and looking over at the face of the CEO at the time, and I was like, "Yep, they upgraded." And I just walked back to my desk and sat down, and he was kind of in shock. He was like, "Wow, this is working." And then he asked me, he was like, "Well, how are you able to do this?" And I said, "Because I'm trying to speak to my customers about what they're trying to achieve, and then making what we have, our solution, fit that." So you can do that in your company. You can adopt a jobs theory lens and really talk to your customers. Ed put in the chat, it all starts and ends with customers, doesn't it? Yeah, it kind of does. So yeah, let's talk about Success Panda. So Success Panda, there's been more, every opportunity that I've been in, every position I've been in, I have used jobs theory to either get promoted, get noticed, come up with new ideas. And all I'm able to do is just, instead of just accept the current paradigm of here are the use cases, here are this, you talk to your customers and you're able to find out, what they're trying to achieve, and then can you and your current offering be engineered to help even achieve some of those micro jobs, right? So Success Panda does many jobs. So similar to Intercom, right? Going back to that example, there's a lot of what we can call micro jobs underneath, we'll say, the big job to be done. So just for introduction, for those who aren't familiar with Success Panda, it's a customer success aggregator and career development platform. So I just took a screenshot. These are some of our newer members that have signed up. And essentially, you can see over here on the left-hand side, there's a career development and also solutions. So the idea is, when I was engineering and thinking of the product of Success Panda, it was all based on what are the jobs to be done for someone who's trying to have career development and in the space. So for instance, in my last position, when I was director of customer success at a Series A startup, I had my boss come to me and say, "Hey, will you check out all of the different onboarding solutions that exist?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I know like one or two, but there's way more than just one or two solutions, right?" And so there was no one aggregated spot to find all those. So that was one of the jobs to be done is, hey, let's aggregate all of the things onto one platform that people can find. So we have a companies tab right here. So that's just one job, right? Hey, I want to find the companies that excel into and service the customer success space. And so all of these, we'll say, engagements over here on the left, networking, that's a job in of itself. Help a mentee, or people who they want to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'm willing to be a mentee," and You don't have to have that awkward conversation of someone reaching out in an unsolicited way to be like, hey, Swathi, can you be my mentor? Well, she didn't ask you to reach out to her, and then you're just making a cold outreach. So if she doesn't want to, it can present a challenging situation. But here we have both mentees and mentors, so you know that their intention is already set. So long story short, with Success Panda, we have all these different jobs that people are trying to achieve. I want to find events. I want to find communities. I want to talk to Swathi on the recruitment and talk to a recruiter. I want to find coaches or consultants. I want to self-organize mock interviews. This month, we're going to be rolling out a new feature called Marketplace, which is going to be able to, you're going to be able to find and download digital products. So think if you have an amazing customer journey that you want to sell for $40, you can sell it. If you want to give back to the community and you have some sort of ICP profile template that you want to give away, you can give it away. And people will be able to go and buy and sell on the marketplace digital products, whether it's courses or whether it's a service. You can set up subscriptions and then you can sell one-time products. So right now, there's a lot of things that exist. There's a lot of people that you can download the free resources, but there's not one aggregated spot. And that's why with Success Panda, I'm not trying to make it about me. I'm making it about the space and then trying to create a platform that makes it easier for people to find what they need. Because to me, when I'm looking at it through a jobs theory lens, it's the job to be done is, can I find what I need all on one platform to be successful in my career? So that's kind of the guiding star. So I also have been doing some coaching, and I'm going to share this real quick. I'm looking at time. I'm going to speed through some of this. So when you think about when I'm doing career coaching, I have a framework that I use. It's a 3-tier framework. There's tier 1, which is landing interviews. Tier 2 is moving on interviews, and tier 3 is landing offers. So understanding a lot of times that there's a job to be done, which is the core job. So the core job would be finding a job. But underneath that, there are a lot of different outcomes that we have to achieve in order to make this job possible, right? So if we go back to our kettle and then our hot beverage example, you could see here that you could potentially start a company or even a coaching where you just help people land interviews. That might be your specialty, that might be what you're good at, but landing interviews does not lead only to the core function of landing a new opportunity and landing a role. So that you want to, when you're in your current role, you want to make sure like what are the customer outcomes that need to be achieved. We have a lot of customer success folks. So if you're looking at the customer journey, for example, what are the core outcomes that need to happen for them to get the job done? And then you want to make sure that you're able to execute against that. So here's an example of when we go back to here, like we're going to look at move on in interviews. So you can think of that as a micro job in and of itself. And there's a lot of stuff going on this slide here, but basically having done many mock interviews, spent many times hiring people, I tried to make 4 different people and different profiles of how people interview. Okay, so this has been my experience. So essentially you have all these swim lanes, and when you go into an interview, a lot of times interviewers already have, say, out of the 45 minutes, they say, okay, we're going to have some small talk, then I'm going to ask these 5 questions and leave questions at the very end. Very common. So when you, so for example, if you look at Brian, he spent the small talk, he went over on his time, and so he only got to 2 questions, right, before he ran out of time. So there are people that are just super long-winded, and there are people who, say like Brad, who understand what the job to be done of what an interview is, right? And so in going back to jobs theory, right, with what is the job to be done in moving on in interviews? Well, if we look at the green spaces, these are what I call selling yourself. So he or she that spends the most minutes selling themselves typically are the people that move on to the next round, right? So you can see Brian spent no minutes. Um, Brad, if we add all the green spaces up, Brad spent 29% of the interview or 13 minutes, Brady 4 minutes and 9%, and then Kathy 7 minutes and 15%. So roughly 1 out of 4 of the people, so when you're 4 people interview, roughly only 1 out of 4 of them is going to move on. And so in this case, it'd be Brad because not only did I execute on my interview technique by using, my car stories, but I spent more minutes actually selling myself because the job to be done of an interview is to sell yourself, right? It's a sales call. So if you do not understand or if you misunderstand what the job to be done of an interview is, then most likely you're not solving for that job. Like if you, for example, if you think it's to make sure they know everything about me, right? It's to make sure that they know my entire resume and all the details in there. So a lot of things I see, like, tell me about yourself, people go through their resume and just go through it. Well, that's not the question I asked. I asked you to tell me about yourself, which is a separate question of, walk me through your resume. If I said walk me through your resume, then that makes sense. But tell me about yourself. I'm expecting a 60-second to 2-minute response to try to keep it conversational. But the person who does that in their mind, whether they are consciously believing that or not, thinking the job to be done of this interview is to make sure that they know my work history, all the awesome things that I've done, and that's not necessarily true. So one of the big thing is going back to technology, and something that I've seen throughout my entire career is we're all competing against good enough. So it's interesting because if you're in a company right now, you're in a tech company, imagine, or if you're selling consulting or services, you're a lot of times you're competing against non-consumption. And a lot of times people don't realize that, and that we're competing against good enough. So for example, in Success Panda, someone could just write out a spreadsheet, right, with the list of all these hiring managers and then a link to their LinkedIn profile where they're like, hey, here's hiring managers, right? So if I just only had Success Panda focus on hiring managers, how am I going to monetize that if we have this competing offer that is either free? Um, so a lot of times we're competing against non-consumption because having a spreadsheet with links is good enough. People are willing to use that rather than, signed up for a paid service. And that's why we also, think about the classic example of just using a CRM. There are still companies out there who use Excel spreadsheets as substitutes for CRMs until they can find one that fits their needs. So just be aware that a lot of times you in your position, you're always competing against what are the jobs to be done that are doing it good enough, because that is going to cut into potentially into your competition, into what you're trying to do. So I'm going to finish up here, speed read, so we can have time for Q&A. This is a post I shared. You can see it's got 2,226 emotion, I don't know what you call them, engagements, 72 comments, 52 reposts. I wanted to add this in here because it's a perfect example, right, of I'm making a joke by showing a meme where we have all of the C-suite people sitting around and only a lowly CSM digging for customer value. And of course, the AI integrations in the corner as the joke. But the whole point of this meme was, there's a lot of companies who say, hey, we're customer first. We believe in our customers. We listen to them. But then if you ask them, hey, when's the last time you visited a customer? It might be months or even years. So obviously the post, I just wanted to share it because we don't spend enough time speaking with our customers and just speaking with them. So there's a lot of data people out there and they're just like, hey, we need data. We need data. Yes, we need data. but data without context leads to sad emoji face, because if you don't have the context of what they're trying to do, right, then you can potentially build products that are not doing the, we'll just say, the larger jobs that they're trying to exist, that they're trying to fill. So let's wrap. I did my best to try to keep it to the timeline, but yeah, so Jobs to Be Done has been incredibly influential in my own career. I continue to always have that mindset where I ask people, hey, what are the jobs to be done? So um, I hope that you're able to think a bit differently about how you could go back to your own role and start looking through a jobs to be done framework and through that glass rather than a solution glass. And then feel free to connect. We'd love to have you on successpanda.io. We have free accounts. I have a group coaching call every Wednesday to help people. It's, I think, the only low it's a quite affordable offering where we have a bunch of people that support each other, and then I'm always open for one-on-one coaching or consulting. And yeah, that wraps up my time. So happy to continue on to the Q&A part.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that. This is awesome. If you could stop sharing, I'd love to get into our fireside chat and this I'm prompting everyone. If you have questions, please throw them in the Q&A. We'll definitely have time for a few, but I'm going to start with asking Brad some of my own questions. So, Brad, thank you so much for sharing those really interesting stories and also real life examples of how you've been using the theory in your own life. That was really cool. So, my first question is, what initially drew you to the jobs to be done theory framework? And like, how was it and how is it in general influenced your approach to problem solving in general?
Yeah, so what initially drew to me is that um, I'm someone who believes that success leaves tracks. And I was speaking with someone who was quite successful because I was asking them when I was in a role that I was frustrated with. I was like, well, we're trying to do X, but the customers seem to want to achieve Y. So, I mean, what do I do? And so that's how I was introduced actually by someone else who introduced me to Jobs to Be Done. And um, what it was able to do was similar to what I just covered, is I was able to look at it through a lens of, why am I trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? Why don't I just come back with what my customers tell me what their job is, and then turn off certain features that can be distracting to them, and kind of make it certain modules that are only um, specific for them. And so that's how I got introduced to Jobs to Be Done. And what was the second part of the question, Swathi?
Oh, just how has it influenced your approach to problem solving, like in general?
Yeah. So I think just in general, I mean, going back to the Success Panda, when I was thinking about creating Success Panda, I just thought about what are all the jobs that people are trying to achieve when they're looking for a job or they're trying to achieve in their career. So like hiring managers, for example, um, a lot of people, they are going through the job search. They only want to bounce ideas off hiring managers to be like, hey, is this a good idea to bring up or is this dumb? So the job is quite limited in scope, but it's an important job because they want access to people who have hired people before. Um, so when you look at some of these micro jobs and how it rolls up into a bigger job, you're able to understand what skill sets and also what are the things that you need to do and master in order to actually help people achieve their much larger job, which is ultimately um, where what they pay you for, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
How did the framework help businesses identify untapped opportunities for innovation and growth?
Yeah, so the framework is powerful because it forces you to talk to your customers and try to understand, and this is a really key point, instead of just watching what they're doing, ask them, what are you trying to do? And there's a big difference between that, right? So when I've worked in like tech companies and software companies, you'll meet operations people who at times will say, well, we don't have to necessarily, um, well, let me back up. They prefer to have quantitative data rather than qualitative data. So they're not so much worried about understanding the context of the data. They're just like, hey, it shows that users are logging in, you know, this many times per month. They're visiting these pages, they're clicking on these buttons. Yes, that's all good data to have, but why? What are they trying to achieve with that, right? And so to go back to my first example about how when I was at my first company, we saw the data coming in, but with this one specific company that was trying to sell to use the reports in order to sell to companies as a sales professional, well, that wasn't a use case, that wasn't anything on our radar. We were receiving the data for months about, and then it wasn't until you go and you say, hey, I see that you're trying to create a report using this, and then you sent me an email that you want me to take this other data from over here and put it in this report. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then when they say, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to I'm trying to make this part of my pitch deck so that I can land, new construction contracts, and it's like, oh, are there other people in your company doing that too? Yeah, I have my whole team doing it. And then if you know that their team's doing it, then probably a lot of their competitors would be able to do that too. And it opens up, um, that TAM, right? And it's the same with McDonald's. Going back to that traditional McDonald's example. Um, I mean, would it be expensive for McDonald's to sell Snickers bars in their, or other pastries, right? When you understand what are some of the other things you're competing with to get the job done, you can a lot of times partner with those companies, right? So, I mean, our relationship, right, Swathi? You're a partner with Success Panda. I don't know anything about recruitment. You do. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. So we're partners but I understand that that recruitment aspect is a key part of one of the one of the points of value and one of the jobs to be done in the overall helping people um, have career success, right? Having a professional development platform that they can have success in.
Yeah, what I've loved about what you've said today, especially, is how kind of focused you're kind of getting with these solutions, right? Like
Mhm.
removing the distractions, being like, this is the problem, like this, and this is the solution for it, and I'm just going to sell you this specific thing. I think how niche you get is, I think, really interesting, and I think there's a lot to learn from that. So thank you. Um, I'm going to do one more question and then I'm seeing the Q&A get more active. So if you have more questions, this is the time to put them in the Q&A. But Brian, my next question for you is, what are some common misconceptions companies have about why customers choose their products or services?
Yeah, so I think misconception is um, that a lot of technical founders believe that their product is amazing, especially first-time founders. They think that the product will sell itself, that everyone will grasp their vision of what the product is supposed to do, that there's not going to be as many support tickets, right? As what can come. And what I've found is in creating anything, so I've created physical products, right? Through, building tables. I've created digital products. I've created services. As someone who is really a creative at heart, I can tell you that everything takes twice as long and it's twice as expensive. But anytime that we have the built-in assumption of well, our customers will inherently understand our value proposition for this feature or this, it usually doesn't happen that way. So a lot of founders will think, well, if we spin up this new product, it'll be an easy stepping stone from A to B. But I think a lot of times, and Success Panda has this challenge, is when you're doing so many jobs, right? So Success Panda is doing a lot of jobs. It's hard to get messaging down for all of these micro jobs, right? To
Mhm.
get attention because you have your main messaging of Success Panda, for example, is to help you um, progress in your career and be a career development platform and be an aggregator. But then also, hey, you want to self-organize a mock interview? Here's an easy, low-cost way to do it. But so messaging is really hard, and I think that a lot of times people focus on features like, hey, we can now integrate with Salesforce. It's like no one cares, right? It's are you doing the job, the fundamental job that they're hiring to do, right? So rather than focusing on features and functionality, shifting that to focus on, what are the jobs to be done is the difference between a solution lens and a jobs lens.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. I'm going to go to one of the questions we're getting. So, selling starts with knowing what problem the prospect is trying to solve. How do you recommend that in an interviewing context, you can't always tell in advance from the job description?
Yeah, so in an interviewing context, let's see what problem is the prospect trying to solve. Yeah, so um, that's a great question, Ed. And I would just say that the job to be done in an interview, um, this is to the heart of the question. Like we don't when we meet with someone and we're interviewing with them the first time, it's almost like what criteria are they really trying to underwrite in the candidate that's going to move them on, right? And I think for us, it's important to understand like what keeps you up at night, things like that. So, what are you trying to achieve? There's certain lines of questioning, like how did this position come available, and then what are some of the pain points? So you can kind of ask them about that, but at the same time, a lot of the questions that you can ask, even if they ask indirectly, you can kind of infer about it. So when I've personally been in job um, interviews before, I always say I have my top three. My top three are, what does the C-suite think about customer success? Who's my boss? And what's the team? And then what's the product, right? And so if I say, yeah, if the product isn't great, you're just going to be a box of Band-Aids and you're just going to be, putting out fires all the time. So if they respond to me and they say, oh, like what's your idea of what a mature product is, that that's perhaps a concern because they're following up on like a statement you made. So, yeah, between just inferring, seeing how they're responding to your statements, and then just asking them, hey, what keeps you up, or what does success look like for this role?
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to close with one last question. So, what advice would you give to leaders looking to implement the JTBD, the framework in their organizations?
Yeah, I would just say just go ahead and start, right? Go ahead and just bring it up because I meet people all the time who, although this is not a new theory or this is not a new way to view, products or how to view, in business, there's still a lot of people who never heard of it before. Um, and so I would just say, just expose people to it. And what you can do is if you're working in an organization that aren't asking some of the questions, like, why are they hiring our product? Rather than you get into the conversation of someone saying, oh, this is a problem that these features aren't being used. We need to try to push users in order to use these features. It's like, why? If that's not that's not part of their job to be done, why are we using our precious, you know, political and attention capital to try to push someone to do something that they don't fundamentally want to do? And I think by reframing jobs theory and providing that perspective, it can allow senior leaders to be like, maybe it's not our top priority to try to get them to use everything on the platform. So just introduce it and see what happens. And it's yielded good results for me so far.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brad. I think this was super helpful, super enlightening. I think this is going to help people on a personal, level in their job search, it seems like as well. I love how you kind of added that element as well, but also internally in organizations. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today and for answering some of these awesome questions. Thank you everyone for being here today in our February Talent Lens. Our next one should be on March 20th, so watch out for that announcement. We are so happy you're here and hope you enjoyed the session. Would love any feedback if you like, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much, Brad, and thanks everyone.
Thanks, Swathi. Bye, everybody. See ya.